My own son tried to take my house by handing the court a will I never wrote. Imagine opening your mail and finding your name twisted into a signature you never made. I know this may sound unbelievable, but stay with me. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to hear this story. And before I go further, if my words strike a chord, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had family push you aside for money or property. Your stories matter as much as mine. That envelope sat in my mailbox like any other piece of mail. The county seal looked routine enough. I carried it inside with a mug of coffee, the steam fogging my glasses as I slid it open. What I pulled out was no bill. It was a legal petition. My son Michael's name listed as petitioner, demanding transfer of my home into his possession. Attached was a will stamped with what looked exactly like my signature. The sight of it shook me so badly I spilled coffee across the kitchen table. My signature, those loops, the way the T cut down like a wire stripped bare, it was mine, yet not. Perfectly mimicked, as if a ghost had studied my hand and then written on my behalf. I called him, heart pounding. He answered on the second ring, his voice so calm it chilled me. When I asked, he didn't deny it. He simply said it was time the house moved to him. Then he hung up. For a long time I sat in silence. Around me the house carried the echoes of years. Elaine's laughter in the kitchen, Michael's childhood footsteps on the stairs, the smell of sawdust from all the shelves I built. This wasn't just a structure, it was the ledger of my life. And now my own son wanted to erase me from it. I drove to see Ms. Hernandez, my attorney. She read the papers carefully, her pen tapping the desk. "George," she said at last, "this doesn't look like a human forgery. It looks like machine output. Have you heard of AI handwriting generators?" The word hit like a twist in the gut. I'd read headlines about artificial intelligence, machines writing essays, copying voices, but I never thought it could be used to cut a man from his home. She explained that such software often leaves traces, metadata invisible to the eye, sometimes even storing the original signature it copied from. For a moment, I felt a strange flicker of hope. If Michael had used a machine to betray me, maybe that machine had also left behind the proof of his crime. I drove home under a blood-red sunset, the documents on the seat beside me. Each stoplight stretched the tension tighter. Inside my house, the air felt different, thick, suspicious, as though the walls themselves were watching to see if I would surrender. That night I sat in Elaine's old rocking chair, the forged will open across my lap. My finger traced the false signature. Fear pressed hard, but then another current surged beneath it, steady and fierce. Machines may have forged my name, but they could not erase the truth of who I am. I had spent a lifetime running wires through walls, finding circuits hidden in silence. And if my son thought he could erase me with lines of code, he was about to discover I knew how to follow currents back to their source. The morning after I found the forged will, the house felt heavier, as if betrayal itself had seeped into the plaster. I couldn't look at the photographs on the wall without hearing Michael's voice from the night before, flat and cold. "It's time the house moved to me." I knew I couldn't waste time. The petition listed a court date just 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to prove that I hadn't surrendered my home. 2 weeks to stop my son from rewriting my life with a line of ink that wasn't mine. I returned to Ms. Hernandez's office. She welcomed me in with that same professional calm, but I could see concern flicker in her eyes. On her desk lay the documents I had dropped off yesterday. She had already run some preliminary checks. "George," she began. I scanned the file into our system. Something strange came up. The digital record isn't consistent with an authentic hand-signed document. She turned her monitor toward me. Lines of code and metadata scrolled like a secret language. "What does it mean?" I asked. She pointed to a field labeled Origin Software, Signature Gen. "This indicates the document was generated by a handwriting simulation tool. That's your first clue." I leaned closer, the words blurring. "So you can prove it's fake?" "Not yet," she said carefully. "Courts don't take kindly to speculation. We need the original digital trail, the authentic signature file this AI copied from. Without it, the other side can claim it was just scanned wrong. My stomach sank. Proof dangled just out of reach. But then she added, the system that produced this may still hold fragments of your real signature, the one it used as a model. If we find that, we'll have undeniable evidence. For the first time since this nightmare began, a flicker of energy coursed through me. Machines may have fabricated the lie, but machines could also hold the truth. That night I called Derek, my neighbor. He was a software engineer who always had some glowing monitor in his garage. He owed me a favor. I had fixed his breaker box last winter during a storm. He listened quietly as I explained, then whistled low. AI signature generators. Yeah, I've heard of them. Some leave metadata trails a mile long. If we can get access to the original file, we might be able to peel back the layers. I drove over. His garage was cluttered with wires, old computer towers, and the smell of solder. He sat me down in front of 3 monitors glowing with code. The scan, he said. I handed him a copy MS. Hernandez had made. Within minutes he had it pulled up on screen, lines of binary flickering. He tapped fast, muttering to himself. Then he froze. There, see that tag? I squinted, seeing only gibberish. He grinned. It's like finding fingerprints. Whoever made this didn't clean the file. There's a reference to a stored dataset. It may still contain your actual signature. My heart thumped. Can you extract it? Maybe. I'll need time. He looked at me with a mix of excitement and sympathy. George, your son messed with the wrong man. AI may be clever, but it's also sloppy. We'll use its own memory against it. For a moment, relief washed over me, but it lasted only until my phone buzzed. A new email from Michael. Dad, you don't need to fight this. Just move out quietly and I'll handle everything. The audacity of it burned. He wrote as if I were a tenant overstaying my lease, not the man who had built this house nail by nail. I wanted to reply, but Derek shook his head. Don't respond. Every message can be twisted in court. Let the evidence speak. I nodded, though my hands trembled with anger. Hours passed as Derek worked. Midnight came, then 1 in the morning. Finally he leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Got something. On the screen appeared an image, my real signature, pulled from the system's dataset. The strokes were identical to what I knew from countless pay stubs and contracts, but beneath it, code revealed how the AI had warped and cloned it to produce the forged will. It was the smoking gun. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. This proves it. Almost, Derek corrected. We need to package this so it's admissible. Metadata logs, timestamps, validation. Otherwise they'll dismiss it as tech jargon. Still, the sight of my true signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. For hours I had feared I was powerless, a man erased by his own blood. But now I held the thread that could unravel the lie. As I left Derek's garage, the sky was paling. Dawn crept over the neighborhood roofs, soft and silent. Yet inside me, everything roared. Michael thought he had written me out with a forgery. What he didn't know was that the very tool he used had already betrayed him. And when the day came to stand before the court, I would make sure everyone saw it. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a mixture that made the air heavy. I sat at the long oak table, hands folded, the forged will in front of me like a weapon aimed at my chest. Michael entered with a crisp suit and the kind of confidence only borrowed power can bring. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in a gray jacket, carried a stack of binders. They walked past me without a glance, as though I were already erased. When the judge arrived, I felt the room shrink. He leafed through the documents as if weighing bricks, his eyes sharp but weary. My attorney, M.S. Hernandez, rose first, outlining our position, that the will was a forgery generated by artificial handwriting software with evidence of digital tampering. Then Michael's lawyer stood, her voice smooth as glass. She insisted the document was legitimate, scanned from an original hard copy, and that my objections were the desperate attempts of an old man unwilling to let go. Each word stung. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Turner Sr.," he said, "do you have the original file or only speculation?" Ms. Hernandez presented Derek's findings, the metadata, the traces of AI software embedded in the file. She spoke with precision, but I could feel the doubt lingering in the room. The judge tapped his pen. I will need time to review this. Until then, the petition to transfer ownership stands as valid. Temporary control of the property is granted to the petitioner. The gavel struck, a sound like thunder cracking open the floor beneath me. I walked out into the sun dazed, the courthouse steps swaying. For the first time in my life, I felt truly displaced, like the house no longer belonged to me, even though my name was etched on every beam inside it. Michael caught my eye from across the plaza. He didn't smile, but the look said everything. In that moment, I realized he didn't just want the house, he wanted me broken. My phone buzzed. A message from Derek. How did it go? I typed back slowly. Judge sided temporary with him. Seconds later, his reply came. Temporary isn't permanent. Metadata trail is stronger than they think. Don't give up. I tried to let those words anchor me, but all I felt was emptiness. That night, the house seemed quieter than ever. Every room echoed Elaine's absence. Every corner whispered Michael's betrayal. I sat at the dining table with the court papers spread out. For hours, I traced the fake signature with my finger, wondering how a boy I had raised to be honest could become a man willing to lie under oath. And then the phone rang. It was an unknown number. A voice on the other end introduced herself as Clara, an analyst who occasionally consulted for Ms. Hernandez. She said she had reviewed Derek's extraction. "Mr. Turner," she told me, "the forgery isn't just sloppy, it's layered. Whoever made it used multiple signature samples. That means there's a pattern, a clear digital fingerprint. If we can match it, the court can't ignore it." I gripped the receiver tighter. "You can prove it." "Not yet, but I think we can find the original dataset. And if we do, your son won't just lose the case, he may face charges." For the first time since the gavel struck, something sparked inside me. Not joy, not yet, but defiance. Still, the damage was done. 2 days later, Michael arrived with movers at the house. They carried boxes as though my life were already packed away. He didn't speak to me directly, only barked instructions to the men. "Careful with that cabinet," he said. "It's worth more than the old man knows." I stood at the foot of the stairs, fists clenched, but the court order tied my hands. For now. One of the movers glanced at me with pity. It cut deep, being looked at like a defeated man in the very house I had built board by board. But inside, I whispered a promise. This isn't the end. The twist came that night. Derek called, his voice vibrating with urgency. "George," Clara dug deeper. "We found something, an online repository where the AI tool stored training data. Your signature is there, along with timestamps proving it was uploaded months ago. Someone had to give it to the system. That means your son didn't just use the tool, he prepared for this." The revelation jolted me upright in Elaine's rocking chair. Michael hadn't acted on impulse. He had planned, collected my signatures over time, fed them into a machine. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated. The anger was sharp, but beneath it was clarity. If we presented this in court, the foundation of his case would collapse. Still, the fear lingered. The movers' boxes now cluttered my living room, symbols of a son who had declared me a guest in my own home. I sat surrounded by them, papers and memories jumbled together, as if my entire life had been reduced to storage. Yet even in that chaos, I felt a flicker of resolve. Elaine's voice seemed to echo in the quiet. "George, don't surrender before the fight is finished." And for the first time in days, I believed her. That night, I wrote one line across a yellow legal pad and left it on the kitchen table. Temporary defeat is not the same as loss. Because tomorrow, we would take the next step, digging deeper into the machine that had stolen my name, and preparing to show the court who truly belonged in this house. The following morning, I woke to the sound of heavy boots in my driveway. Through the blinds, I saw Michael standing with 2 men in dark suits, process servers. One of them knocked hard against the door, their papers pressed against the glass. When I opened, the taller one recited words like bullets. "You are hereby served with a restraining order. Temporary removal from the property is ordered until further review. I stared at the document. My own son had gone beyond taking the house. He now sought to expel me entirely. Michael didn't meet my eyes. He simply turned and walked down the driveway, his phone already pressed to his ear. The mover's boxes still sat inside, half filled with my belongings, as if mocking me. For the first time, I felt the chill of homelessness, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because the place I belonged had been declared off-limits by my own child. I called Ms. Hernandez immediately. She sighed heavily when she heard the news. "It's a tactical move," she explained. "They're trying to pressure you to make you settle before evidence comes forward. Don't give in, we'll fight this." I drove straight to her office, the restraining order shaking in my hands. Derek and Clara were already there, laptops open. On the screen was the dataset they had uncovered the night before. Hundreds of signatures, fragments of mine fed into the AI system. Clara pointed to the timestamps. "Look here. Your son started uploading these samples months ago. It proves premeditation." Derek leaned forward. "And here's the kicker, we found duplicates. He copied your old checks, contracts, even a Christmas card signature. It's all logged." Hope surged, but Ms. Hernandez cautioned me. "We need to be careful. The other side will claim this evidence is inadmissible or that it was obtained illegally. They may even suggest you fabricated it." Her words landed like cold water. Even when truth was in my hands, it seemed fragile. That afternoon, we entered a preliminary hearing. The judge looked tired, his desk piled with files. Michael's lawyer strode forward confidently. "Your Honor, we request that the restraining order remain in place. Mr. Turner Sr. has shown signs of instability and is interfering with lawful transfer." The insinuation twisted in my gut. Instability, as if grief and betrayal had made me less of a man, less deserving of dignity. Ms. Hernandez stood, her tone measured. "Your Honor, we have compelling evidence that the contested will was fabricated through artificial intelligence. We request time to present technical experts who can authenticate this." The judge rubbed his forehead. "Until that evidence is formally submitted, the restraining order stands. Mr. Turner Sr. is to vacate the premises immediately." The gavel fell. A second thunderclap. That night, I sat in a motel room by the freeway, staring at the beige walls and buzzing neon outside the window. My house, Elaine's laughter, Michael's childhood footsteps, my lifetime of labor, stood dark and silent miles away, claimed by someone who had forgotten what it meant to belong. I thought of walking away, of letting it all go. What use is fighting your own blood? But then I looked at the folder on the bed, filled with Clara's printouts and Derek's notes. The truth was there. Machines do not lie when their code is read correctly. And I realized surrender would not only erase me, it would erase Elaine's memory, every sacrifice we made for the family. The twist came near midnight. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number, but the words froze me. "You should stop this, Dad. If you keep pushing, I'll reveal things you don't want the world to know." No name, no signature, but I knew Michael. Threats now, not just legal maneuvers. My hands shook as I reread the message. What things could he possibly mean? Old family arguments, private griefs, or was it just another tactic, another attempt to break me down? Either way, the line had been crossed. This was no longer about property, it was a war for my dignity. At dawn, I drove back to Derek's garage. He looked up from his monitors, bleary-eyed but alert. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. I handed him my phone. "He's threatening me now." Derek frowned. "Then it's time to go on offense. We have enough data to corner him, but we'll need to move fast before he escalates." I nodded. The motel walls, the courthouse defeats, the restraining order, all of it had left me hollow. But the anger had crystallized into something sharper. If my son wanted war, then war he would get. I spent the next day pacing the cramped motel room, the blinds half drawn against the glare of the freeway lights. Michael's text replayed in my mind like a broken record. "If you keep pushing, I'll reveal things you don't want the world to know." What secrets? My life had been plain, 40 years as an electrician, a marriage of quiet devotion, a son raised with as much patience as I could muster. Yet the more I thought, the more I realized how much we all bury in silence. Elaine and I had weathered storms, money troubles in the early years, my temper short when work drained me, nights I came home too tired to listen. And yes, there had been one mistake, one I had carried like a scar under my shirt for decades. Back in my 30s, desperate for cash during a recession, I'd taken side jobs without permits. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that if exposed, it could stain the reputation I'd built since. Elaine had forgiven me, urging me never to repeat it. I hadn't, but the paperwork, the whispers, they still existed somewhere. Could Michael know? Did he dig through my old files, hunting for dirt? That afternoon, I met with Ms. Hernandez, Derek, and Clara in her office. My hands trembled as I set the phone on the table, Michael's message glowing on the screen. Clara's brows knitted. Classic intimidation, he's bluffing. But Derek shook his head. Not necessarily. If he got hold of old records, tax forms, contracts, he could twist them. I admitted the truth, my voice low. 30 years ago I cut corners. I worked without permits for a while, nothing unsafe but not legal either. Elaine made me stop, but if Michael found evidence... Ms. Hernandez leaned forward, eyes steady. George, listen to me. Context matters, even if he dredges this up. It doesn't erase the fact that you built your business honestly for decades afterward. But emotionally, it's what he wants, to shame you into silence. Her words steadied me a little, but inside, shame and anger wrestled. My son, weaponizing the worst of me. That evening, another message came. This time it included an image, a faded photocopy of an old inspection notice, stamped with red ink, unauthorized work. My breath caught. That paper had been buried in a file box in the garage. Michael had gone digging. The caption read, "Want the judge to see this, or the papers." I sat there staring until the screen dimmed. I felt both fury and grief, as if Elaine's voice might rise from the silence to scold us both for what we had become. The twist hit me hardest not in the threat itself, but in the realization of how far Michael had prepared for this war. The forged will wasn't impulse. It was strategy, layered months in advance, built not only on technology, but on pieces of my past he had scavenged like weapons. And suddenly, I saw the larger picture. He wasn't just taking my house. He was rewriting me, turning every sacrifice into weakness, every flaw into ammunition. At midnight, I drove back to Derek's garage. He sat in the glow of his monitors, half a pizza box open beside him. "George, you look like hell," he said gently. I dropped the phone on his desk. "He's got my past. He'll drag it out." Derek studied the image, then looked at me. "So what? You made mistakes. We all did. The difference is, you didn't forge a will. You didn't betray your own blood. Don't let him define the story." His words struck something raw. For years I had defined myself by silence, by keeping peace even at the cost of my pride. Maybe that was how Michael learned he could push boundaries until nothing remained. Not anymore. By dawn, I had made a decision. Ms. Hernandez would use the AI evidence. Clara would prepare testimony. Derek would secure every digital trail. As for Michael's threats, if he forced me to confront my past, then I would. But on my terms, not his. The road ahead was steep, but I felt a strange calm settle in. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to Michael's moves. I was preparing my own. The courthouse looked different this time. Not like a monument of justice, but like a stage where my life would be performed for strangers to judge. I walked up the marble steps with Ms. Hernandez at my side, Derek and Clara following close. Each of them carried folders, laptops, evidence. I carried only the weight of 40 years and a name I refused to let vanish. Inside, the benches were packed tighter than before. Word had spread. Neighbors, curious onlookers, even a local reporter scribbling notes. My son sat at the petitioner's table, perfectly pressed suit, jaw clenched, eyes avoiding mine. The last time I saw that face, he was 16, standing in our driveway asking for the car keys. Now it was hardened, calculating, a stranger carved from someone I once loved. The judge entered and the room settled. Ms. Hernandez opened with a steady voice, presenting Derek's analysis. Your Honor, the document in question was not created by hand. Metadata embedded in the file points directly to AI handwriting software. Here are the logs, timestamps, and the extracted originals. She handed the folder across. Clara explained the dataset trail, her tone sharp but patient, as though teaching a stubborn class. For a moment, I felt the tide turn. The judge leaned in, scanning the charts. Michael's lawyer frowned, flipping through her notes. A hush spread, the kind that comes before a storm. Then the storm came. Michael's attorney rose, her expression cool. Your Honor, we anticipated such claims, and while my client denies any misuse of technology, we must address the respondent's credibility. We submit Exhibit B. She placed a faded inspection report on the bench. The red stamp glared, unauthorized work. My chest tightened. It was the very paper Michael had threatened me with. The lawyer's voice cut like a scalpel. 3 decades ago, Mr. Turner performed construction without permits, violating state law. He has a history of circumventing regulations, endangering clients. If he cut corners then, how can this court trust his testimony now? A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. My ears rang. MS. Hernandez objected, arguing that past mistakes had no bearing on the present case, but the damage was done. Michael glanced at me for the first time all morning, and in his eyes I saw not triumph but a darker satisfaction. The judge tapped his gavel for order. Mr. Turner Sr., do you wish to respond to these allegations? I rose slowly, my legs heavy, my throat dry. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, to hide the shame. But I thought of Elaine, of the years we had worked to build a life worth something, and I knew silence had cost me enough already. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice rough. 30 years ago I was desperate. Work was scarce, bills piled high. I took side jobs without permits. It was wrong. My wife reminded me of that every day until I stopped. And I did stop. I rebuilt my reputation, earned licenses, ran a business honestly for decades. That stamp on a faded paper doesn't define me. What defines me is 40 years of work done right, and the house I built with my own hands. That is what's at stake today, not an old mistake. The room quieted. I could hear my own breath, shaky but firm. The judge studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded slightly. The court acknowledges the admission. Past errors are not irrelevant, but neither are they determinative. We will proceed with technical evidence. Relief and exhaustion hit me at once. I lowered myself back into my chair, MS. Hernandez squeezing my arm briefly. Derek whispered, you did the right thing, you owned it, that matters. But I saw Michael's jaw tighten, his knuckles white against the table. For him, this wasn't about law anymore. It was personal war. By afternoon, the judge recessed, stating he would review all evidence before issuing a ruling on the will's authenticity. The restraining order remained in place, but so did the possibility of reversal. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions about AI fraud, about family betrayal, about my admission of past mistakes. I said nothing. I simply walked down the steps, the weight of the day pressing heavier than the summer heat. Yet beneath that weight, something else stirred. Michael had tried to use my past to bury me. Instead, I had spoken it aloud and was still standing. Shame had no more power once it was confessed, and that, I realized, was my son's blind spot. He believed threats and secrets kept me chained, but chains break the moment you stop hiding them. That night back in the motel, I sat with the yellow pad again. I wrote, "They can strip walls, but not truth." Tomorrow the fight would continue, and this time I would not fight only for my house, but for my name. The morning after the hearing, I woke with something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. The shame of my past was no longer a secret. I had faced it, and though Michael had flung it like mud, it had slid off because I refused to hide. That freedom sharpened me. When I arrived at Derek's garage, he and Clara were already bent over the monitors. Streams of code scrolled down the screens, the digital skeleton of the forged will. Derek spun in his chair. "George, we dug deeper last night. The AI tool your son used, Signature Gen, it logs not just the forged outputs but every account tied to the user. Guess whose email showed up? My breath caught. Michael's, Clara nodded. His personal account. He created the forgery under his own login, probably thinking the system anonymized it. But the metadata is clear. Date, time, IP address. It ties him directly. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. For weeks I'd been painted as unstable, desperate. But here was the first nail in the coffin of his lies. "Print it all," I said. "Every log, every timestamp." That afternoon, MS. Hernandez convened us in her office. She spread the documents across the table, each page a silent witness. Login credentials, session histories, even payment records showing Michael's credit card billed for handwriting module upgrade. "George," she said softly, "this is gold. Not only does it prove the forgery, it shows intent. He wasn't tricked, he engineered it." For a moment I closed my eyes. I remembered Michael as a child, sitting cross-legged on the floor with crayons, drawing crooked houses and telling me, "This one's for you, Dad." And now, decades later, he had used a machine to steal the real house, the one those drawings once imagined. The twist came that evening. Derek called, his voice buzzing with excitement. "George, you won't believe this. The AI logs don't just store signatures, they store usage notes. People sometimes type comments when testing outputs. Guess what your son wrote?" My chest tightened. "What?" Derek read it aloud. "Needs to look older, like Dad's hand shakes more." I sank into Elaine's rocking chair, the air leaving me. My son hadn't just forged my name. He had mocked my age, my steady decline, reducing me to a tremor in a line of ink. For a long moment, grief burned hotter than anger. Then slowly the grief hardened into resolve. "Save that," I told Derek, "every word." At the next strategy meeting, MS. Hernandez outlined our move. "We'll file a motion to dismiss his petition entirely based on fraud. The logs tie him directly to the forgery. If the judge accepts this, we can go beyond defense. We can seek sanctions." Clara added, "The usage note about your hand shaking, that's intent to deceive based on age discrimination. It paints him not only as a forger, but as someone exploiting your vulnerability." The thought was bitter, but strangely empowering. He had tried to weaponize my years. Instead, those words would become the rope tightening around his case. The hearing was set for Friday. That morning, the courthouse felt different. The weight of weeks seemed lighter, replaced by something steadier, like the calm before a storm I finally felt ready to walk into. When the judge entered, MS. Hernandez presented the logs. She spoke with the patience of a surgeon, each word deliberate. The petitioner used an AI tool to fabricate a will. His personal account, his payment details, his comments, here they are. This was no mistake, it was premeditated fraud. The judge's brows furrowed. He flipped through the evidence. "Mr. Turner Jr., do you deny this account belongs to you?" Michael's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, anyone could have accessed that account. Metadata can be fabricated." But the judge raised a hand. "Enough. These logs are consistent and corroborated. I will review them in full." I watched Michael shift in his seat, his composure cracking. For the first time since this battle began, he looked smaller, less certain. As we left the courtroom, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Turner Sr., do you think your son will face charges?" I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at Michael across the plaza. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. Behind his glare, I saw fear, not for losing the house, but for being unmasked as the architect of this entire scheme. I turned away, my steps firm. That night in the motel, I opened the window. The air smelled faintly of rain, cool against my face. For weeks, every night had felt like defeat. But now the tide was turning. Michael had wanted to erase me with ink that wasn't mine. Instead, the very machine he trusted had preserved his guilt. I leaned against the sill, whispering into the quiet, "Elaine, we're closer now, closer than ever." Yet even as I said it, I knew Michael wouldn't retreat easily. He had already dug into my past, already stooped to threats. Exposed, cornered, he would lash out harder. And I had to be ready. By Monday morning, the first headline hit the local paper. "Retired contractor accused of fraud, past permit violation surface." I sat in the motel lobby, the paper trembling in my hands. Michael's smirk seemed to echo in every line, though his name never appeared. Instead, the article painted me as a man who had cut corners for decades, now fighting to keep a house I didn't deserve. The reporter quoted anonymous sources who claimed I was difficult, prone to temper, unreliable. Neighbors I'd mowed lawns for, fixed lights for, people I thought of as friends, were suddenly willing to speak on record, their words twisted into a chorus of suspicion. When I checked my phone, the storm had spread. Online forums buzzed with strangers debating whether I was a greedy old man clinging to property better suited to the next generation. Some comments were crueler. If even his own son wants him out, he must be impossible. The restraining order had locked me out of my house. Now Michael had locked me out of my own reputation. MS. Hernandez called, her voice tense. George, stay calm. Public opinion isn't the court, but this is his strategy to weaken you, to pressure you into settling. Don't give him that satisfaction. Easier said than done. When I went for coffee, I felt eyes following me, whispers trailing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't simply fighting in court. I was on trial everywhere. The twist came that evening. A news segment aired on television. The anchor's polished voice announced, "New revelations show Mr. George Turner once operated without permits, raising questions about his integrity in the current property dispute with his son." Then they showed it, the faded inspection notice, the red stamp unauthorized work, splashed across the screen for thousands to see. My past mistake, dragged from the dust of 30 years, now broadcast as if it were the headline of my life. I felt my chest tighten. In a motel room dimly lit by a flickering lamp, I sat frozen, watching my own humiliation loop again and again. By midnight, my phone buzzed with messages. Some from old co-workers offering sympathy, others from strangers sending insults. The one that cut deepest was from Michael. "Told you the world would know. Still want to fight." For a moment, I nearly folded. It would be easier to surrender, to hand him the keys, to vanish quietly. I imagined Elaine's voice, weary of conflict, telling me to let it go. But then another memory surfaced. Elaine standing in our kitchen years ago, flour on her hands, telling me, "George, honesty doesn't mean weakness. It means you stand even when people point." I realized Michael had miscalculated. He thought shame would silence me. But the more the world repeated my past, the lighter it became to carry. Secrets weigh more in the dark. In the light, they lose their teeth. The next morning, I walked into MS. Hernandez's office with the newspaper under my arm. "He wants to use my past against me," I said. "Fine. Let's give the court the whole story, my mistakes and my redemption. Every hour I worked right, every building I wired safe, every job passed inspection after that." Clara leaned forward, her eyes bright. "George, that could work. If you frame it not as denial but as growth, the judge may see you as credible, resilient." The AI forgery stands in starker contrast. Derek nodded. "We'll compile records, licenses renewed, inspections cleared. The machine preserved Michael's lies. We'll show the paper trail of your truth." For the first time since the headlines broke, I felt steady. They had taken my house, my reputation, even my privacy, but they hadn't taken my voice. That evening, I sat by the motel window, watching rain streak down the glass. The world outside blurred, but inside me a decision sharpened. Michael wanted me silent, cornered, ashamed. Instead, I would speak. Not only in court, but in the open. If the world wanted to judge, let them judge the whole story. Because the truth was simpler than all the noise. I had stumbled once, but I had built a life with my hands, honest and steady, for decades since. And no algorithm, no forged signature, no headline could erase that. The invitation came from an unexpected place, a local radio station. The host, known for sharp questions and a loyal audience, wanted me on air to tell my side. At first, I hesitated. The thought of strangers dissecting my life terrified me. But then I remembered the motel lobby, the headlines, the whispers that followed me like shadows. Silence had done me no favors. It was time to speak. When I walked into the studio, the air smelled faintly of coffee and dust. The host, a man with kind eyes but a steel voice, shook my hand. "Mister, Turner, our listeners have read the papers. They think they know your story. Let's give them the truth. I sat before the microphone, heart pounding like I was about to step onto a scaffold. The on-air light glowed red. The host began softly. George, people have heard you cut corners in your past. They've seen the inspection report. What do you say to them? I drew a breath, steady and slow. It's true. 30 years ago, I worked without permits. I was young, desperate, and foolish, but I stopped. I rebuilt my career with honesty. Every inspection after that passed clean. I raised a family in the house I wired with my own hands. I won't deny my mistakes, but I won't let them erase the decades of good that followed. There was silence on the other side of the glass. Then the host leaned closer. And now your son is trying to take that house. I nodded. Yes, he forged my signature using a machine. We have the evidence. He even wrote in the system's notes, mocking my age, saying the forgery should look like my hand shook more. That's not just fraud, that's cruelty. The words caught in my throat, but I pressed on. I'm not fighting for wealth. I'm fighting for dignity, for every parent who sacrificed only to be discarded, for every hand that built something, only to watch it stolen by those they trusted most. The twist came live, unexpected. The host leaned back, eyes wide, and said, "We just received dozens of messages from listeners. Many of them are older fathers and mothers. They say your story feels like theirs, children who forgot what was given, who saw their parents as stepping stones. George, you've struck a nerve." I blinked, stunned. For weeks, I'd been painted as the villain. Now, in the space of minutes, strangers were writing to say I wasn't alone. The host smiled faintly. Seems people needed to hear this. When I left the station, the sun was high and hot, but the air felt lighter. My phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from coworkers, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. "We heard you, we believe you." It wasn't universal support, of course. Online, Michael's camp still pushed their narrative, but something had shifted. The silence that once strangled me had broken. My voice was out there and people were listening. The high point came that evening. A local news outlet replayed clips from the interview, contrasting my words with Michael's polished denial. Viewers flooded the comments, questioning his motives. Some even defended me, strangers taking up my story as if it were their own. I sat in the motel, watching the screen, feeling something I hadn't felt since Elaine was alive, vindication. But as the glow settled, the open wound remained. Because across town, I knew Michael was watching too. And if there was one thing I understood about my son by now, it was this: he couldn't bear losing control. Sure enough, my phone lit up later with a new message from him. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, Dad. Next time I'll make sure the world sees who you really are." The words chilled me. He wasn't retreating, he was sharpening his next weapon. I set the phone down, exhaled, and whispered to Elaine's memory, "The battle's not over, but at least I'm not fighting in the dark anymore." The morning after the radio interview, I felt lighter. For the first time in months, strangers nodded at me in the cafe instead of whispering. A man even patted my shoulder and said, "Heard you on the air, stay strong." But good winds never blow long in storms like these. By afternoon, Ms. Hernandez called me in with an edge to her voice. "George, the petitioner has submitted new evidence. You need to see this." When I arrived, she laid a crisp document on the table. My eyes narrowed. It was a notarized agreement, apparently signed by me 2 years ago, stating I intended to gift the house to Michael upon retirement. The signature looked like mine. The date was plausible. Even the notary's stamp gleamed official. I shook my head, heat rising in my chest. "I never signed this. Never." Ms. Hernandez tapped the paper. "It's clever, more sophisticated than the forged will. If the court believes this was prepared long before the dispute, it undermines everything we've built." At the next hearing, Michael's lawyer strutted forward, waving the document like a victory flag. "Your Honor, this proves intent. Mr. Turner Sr. agreed years ago to pass the property. This dispute is nothing but buyer's remorse." The judge examined the pages, brow furrowing. "Notarized?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer replied smoothly. "Duly stamped and dated." I rose, my voice shaking with fury. "That's a lie. I never signed it." but the judge held up a hand. The document will be admitted for review. Authenticity will be determined by further examination. The gavel struck. My stomach dropped. That evening in the motel, despair settled heavy. I'd barely begun to win back the public's trust, and now this new blade was at my throat. Elaine's rocking chair, my yellow legal pad, my tools, all still locked in the house I couldn't enter. Now the very story I told, the story of dignity, was being unraveled by ink I never touched. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how many more tricks my son had prepared. The twist came later that night. Derek and Clara stormed into the motel room, laptops open, eyes alight. "George," Derek said, "we looked at the notary's stamp. The ID number belongs to a woman who retired in 2015, but the document is dated 2021. Clara added, and the font used in the header, it wasn't released until after that date. Whoever fabricated this forgot the details." My heart kicked in my chest. "So it can be disproved." Derek grinned for the first time in days. "Not just disproved, we can prove it's synthetic. Same software, same digital fingerprints as the will." Relief surged like oxygen after drowning. The noose wasn't as tight as it seemed. Still, the road ahead was brutal. The judge had accepted the paper for review. Public perception tilted again. Headlines now screamed, "Father's denial shaken by gift deed discovery." Some neighbors crossed the street rather than greet me. Online comments sneered, "He's changing his story every day." I sat by the motel window, rain streaking down the glass. Betrayal layered on betrayal, but beneath the weight I felt a core of iron hardened. Michael thought he had buried me with another forgery. Instead, he'd given me the rope to drag his lies into the light. The next morning, I wrote a line on my yellow pad. "Every false page he creates brings me closer to the truth." Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about who I was, and whether a father's name could be erased by his own son's ambition. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper, a mixture that never failed to remind me of permanence. Once something made it onto those records, it was carved deeper than stone. That was what frightened me most about Michael's gift deed. If it stood, it would outlive me. MS. Hernandez arranged her files neatly as the bailiff called the case. Derek and Clara sat behind me, their laptops closed but their eyes sharp. I felt their presence like anchors, keeping me from drifting into despair. The opposing counsel wasted no time. He held up the document as if it were scripture. "Your Honor, we also have a witness, a retired notary who recalls authenticating this agreement." A woman in her 60s shuffled forward. She wore a conservative blazer and carried herself with practiced dignity. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "I notarized this man's signature in 2021. He signed willingly." Gasps rippled through the gallery. My chest tightened. They'd found someone to play the part. MS. Hernandez rose slowly, her tone calm but cutting. "Ma'am, may I ask when you retired?" The woman frowned. 2015. "And you are certain you notarized this in 2021? "Yes." MS. Hernandez slid a printed sheet across the bench. "Your Honor, this is the state's official notary registry. It confirms the witness's commission expired in 2015. She was not legally authorized to notarize anything in 2021. The judge's eyebrows rose. "Ma'am, is this correct?" The woman faltered, color draining from her cheeks. I might be mistaken about the date." A murmur swept the courtroom. Derek passed a note to MS. Hernandez. She nodded and handed another exhibit to the clerk. "Additionally, forensic analysis shows the document uses a font family released in 2019, 4 years after this witness claims to have retired. In short, Your Honor, the document is impossible." The gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. The judge's voice carried weight. "This court will not tolerate fabricated evidence. The so-called deed is stricken from the record, and I will be referring this matter for investigation." I closed my eyes briefly. Relief surged through me like a tide breaking through a dam. Michael, however, did not flinch. He leaned close to his lawyer, whispering furiously, I caught only fragments. Another angle Dad doesn't media. His composure cracked, but his determination remained. The judge looked directly at him. Mr. Turner Jr., this is the second questionable document associated with your case. You are walking on dangerous ground. Do you understand? Michael nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched. When we stepped into the hallway, reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs popped, microphones angled toward my face. Mr. Turner, how do you feel about your son presenting false evidence? I gripped the railing for steadiness. I feel what any parent would feel, betrayed. But today showed something important. Truth leaves fingerprints and lies leave cracks. My job is to make those cracks visible. It wasn't a speech rehearsed. It was something that rose naturally from the exhaustion and the faint pulse of hope beating inside me. Later, in Ms. Hernandez's office, the atmosphere shifted from relief to strategy. She spread files across the desk. We've blocked 2 attempts, but he won't stop. The judge is losing patience with him, which works in our favor. Still, we need more than defense, we need offense. Derek leaned forward. What if we show the pattern, not just the fake will and deed, but every financial demand Michael made? The car, the tuition, the endless checks. Frame it as a history of exploitation. Clara added softly, and contrast it with what you've given the community. The jury of public opinion matters. By the time final ruling comes, let everyone see who's been building and who's been bleeding. I sat back, absorbing their words. For months I'd been reacting. Now, for the first time, I felt the stirrings of initiative. But before we left Ms. Hernandez gave a final caution. George, remember, he'll lash out harder now. People like Michael don't back down when cornered. They double down. Be prepared. Her words echoed as I walked into the night air. The courthouse behind me glowed under street lamps, an edifice of authority that suddenly felt more like a shield than a threat. For the first time, I wasn't walking away defeated. The next morning, I rose earlier than usual. Sleep had been patchy, but my mind carried a new steadiness. For months, I had walked into hearings like a man expecting blows. Now I walked into Ms. Hernandez's office with something else, resolve. She looked up from her desk as I entered. "George," she said, "you seem different today." "I'm tired of waiting to be hit," I told her. "It's time we swing back." Derek arrived minutes later, his messenger bag bulging with files. He slapped a stack onto the desk, pulled the last 10 years of bank records, mortgage filings, and credit checks. "Guess what? Michael's been busy." I leaned over the papers. Numbers filled the page, loans, balances, interest rates. Derek tapped a line with his pen. "See this? A loan application filed under Michael's name. Collateral listed. Anticipated inheritance of Turner family residence. He tried to use your house to secure a private loan, twice." Heat rose in my chest. Without owning it, without my consent. Exactly. He's been presenting himself as the inevitable heir, and some lenders bought the story. Ms. Hernandez's eyes narrowed. This is a pattern of exploitation, a documented trail. Combined with the forged deed and will, it paints a damning picture. We prepared for days. Clara combed through years of receipts, tuition payments, car loans, every check I'd written to cover Michael's emergencies. Derek crafted a timeline, each marker a moment my son had leaned on me not for survival, but for convenience. On Friday, we stepped into the courthouse armed not with defense, but with offense. Ms. Hernandez stood, her voice carrying crisp authority. "Your Honor, the respondent requests admission of exhibits demonstrating a consistent pattern of financial exploitation by the petitioner. We contend that this case is not about rightful inheritance but about systematic abuse of parental trust." She handed the judge a thick binder. Each tab bore a date, each page a figure. Michael's lawyer rose with forced calm. "Your Honor, these are irrelevant. Parents often provide financial assistance." Ms. Hernandez didn't flinch. "Generosity is one thing. Collateralizing a home you don't own, forging documents, and presenting false testimony is another." She clicked the projector remote. On the courtroom screen appeared a digital timeline. 2015, tuition check $20,000. 2017, car purchase $25,000. 2019, apartment deposit $15,000. 2021, loan attempt using father's property as collateral. Each date glowed like a wound reopening. The gallery murmured. Even the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Turner Jr., do you dispute these records?" Michael's jaw worked. "Parents help their children. That's not a crime." The judge's gaze hardened. It becomes questionable when help crosses into fraud. By midday recess, the mood had shifted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Headlines online began to tilt again. Father shows decade of exploitation. Pattern of abuse surfaces in Turner property dispute. I sat outside on the courthouse steps, the spring air cool against my skin. For the first time, I wasn't only defending my dignity, I was reclaiming it. But halfway through lunch, Derek returned pale-faced, phone in hand. "George, you need to hear this." He played an audio clip circulating online. Michael's voice rang through, clipped from some interview he'd given. "My father is senile. He doesn't remember half the things he signs. We're protecting the estate from his decline." The words cut deeper than any forged paper. He wasn't just calling me greedy, he was calling me incompetent. MS. Hernandez clenched her jaw. That's his next strategy. Paint you as unfit. If the court buys into diminished capacity, it undercuts everything. A chill spread through me. He was no longer fighting for property. He was fighting to erase me as a reliable witness in my own life. That afternoon in court, Michael doubled down. His lawyer hinted at cognitive decline, suggesting an evaluation might be in order. Murmurs filled the gallery again. I forced myself to my feet. My voice shook at first, then steadied. "Your Honor, I built a construction business from the ground up. I managed projects worth millions well into my 60s. I buried my wife with clarity of mind, and I stand here today with clarity still. My son may want to rewrite my history, but numbers do not lie. Documents do not forge themselves, and parents do not become senile simply because their children grow impatient." For a long moment, the courtroom was silent. Then the judge said, "The court will not order an evaluation at this time. The evidence of forgery already weighs heavily. Proceed." The blow Michael had aimed at my credibility missed, but it landed somewhere else, in my heart. Hearing my own flesh and blood question my mind was a cruelty I hadn't prepared for. Still, as I left the courthouse that evening, the sunset caught the courthouse windows, painting them in amber light. I realized something. Truth had weight. Lies required scaffolding, constant work to prop them up, and Michael was exhausting himself building that scaffolding higher and higher. I wrote another line on my yellow pad. "He can question my memory, but he cannot erase my resolve." The whispers started before I even reached the courthouse steps. I heard them in the cafe line, at the gas station, outside the motel. "Poor old man, he doesn't even know what he's signing." Michael's tactic had landed. He wanted me painted not as greedy, but as senile. That morning, MS. Hernandez greeted me with a look equal parts determination and worry. "George, this is ugly. They've filed a motion suggesting you undergo a mental competency evaluation. If the judge agrees, the process could drag for months, and worse, it would cast doubt on everything you've said." I adjusted my tie with hands that trembled more from anger than age. "Then we show them I'm sharper than ever." 2 days later, MS. Hernandez arranged for an independent psychologist to meet me. I expected a cold interrogation, but the woman who entered her office carried a warmth that disarmed me. Dr. Patel, mid-40s, eyes bright with curiosity. She asked about my past projects, the years building houses, the names of suppliers I worked with in the 90s. I answered with precision, even recalling addresses of long-gone sites. At one point she tested me with memory cards, random patterns of numbers and shapes. I repeated them backward, then in sequence, quicker than she'd expected. Her brows lifted. "Mr. Turner, I evaluate people half your age who can't recall this cleanly. Whatever your son says, your cognition is intact." Relief loosened a knot inside me, but I didn't show it. I only said, "Please put that on the record." At the next hearing, Michael's lawyer opened with smug confidence. "Your Honor, we call M.S. Evelyn Carter, a longtime friend of the Turner family, to testify regarding Mr. Turner's memory lapses." A woman I vaguely recognized took the stand. She spoke of times I'd forgotten birthdays or mixed up names at gatherings. Each story painted me as doddering, slipping. M.S. Hernandez rose for cross-examination. "M.S. Carter, do you recall the barbecue in 2018 you just mentioned?" "Yes," the woman said. "Do you recall who catered it?" The woman hesitated. I think it was. "It was Johnson's Smokehouse," I said clearly from the table, loud enough for the gallery. "July 14th, 2018. Ribs overcooked, potato salad spoiled in the sun. Everyone joked about it for months." Laughter rippled through the room. M.S. Carter's face reddened. The judge's gavel restored silence, but the damage was done. When it was my turn, M.S. Hernandez asked simply, "Mr. Turner, can you tell us about your last major construction contract?" I leaned forward, speaking with steady cadence. "The Harbor District Complex, completed in 2016, 47 units. Brick sourced from Kilroy Bricks, roofing by Stevens & Sons. Cost overruns due to a steel shipment delayed from Seattle. We mitigated by sourcing half from Reno. I still have the invoices in storage." The gallery murmured. Even the judge scribbled notes. Michael shifted in his seat, his knuckles white against the table. During recess, reporters crowded me again. One asked bluntly, "Mr. Turner, your son says you're slipping. Do you have any response?" I looked straight into the camera lens. If remembering every brick and beam of a project is slipping, then maybe memory means something different to him. I've spent decades building. I haven't forgotten one thing I've built, or who I built it for. The clip aired that evening. By morning, the headlines told a new story. Father's memory shames false claims. Construction tycoon recalls every detail, son's allegations collapse. For the first time, online comments leaned heavily my way. "If that's dementia, I want it." "Son looks desperate." But victory carried a bitter aftertaste. In the motel alone, I replayed the moment Michael stared at me across the courtroom. Not with shame, not with regret, but with something colder. A promise. He was losing ground and he knew it, which meant his next strike would be harder. I wrote on my yellow pad that night. "He tried to take my house, then my name, now my mind. What's left but to try to take me entirely?" The thought chilled me, but it also sharpened my resolve. Whatever came next, I would not be the man who surrendered. The week after I disproved Michael's claim of senility should have been quiet. I expected silence from his camp, maybe even retreat. Instead, I woke to see my own face on the front page of the San Diego Herald. "Turner Sr. accused of mistreating workers." The article claimed I had underpaid crews, cut safety corners, even fired men without severance. My stomach twisted. I had made mistakes over decades in construction, sure, but never like this. These were outright lies, recycled rumors dressed up as fact. The byline. A journalist I knew had once been close to Michael's circle of friends. By midday, the poison had spread. Social media buzzed with hashtags, #GreedyFather, #TurnerTruth. Strangers who'd cheered my memory at court now questioned my integrity. M.S. Hernandez tapped the paper in frustration. "It's character assassination. He's shifting battlegrounds from legal arguments to reputation warfare." I said nothing, only stared at the ink bleeding onto my fingers. The blow that hurt most came 2 nights later. I stopped by the corner diner where I'd shared countless meals with Frank, a friend of 30 years. He always saved me a seat at the counter. That evening, he didn't even look at me. When I slid onto the stool, he muttered, "George, maybe you should just let it go. Folks are saying too much now." His voice carried the weight of distance, the kind that doesn't close easily. I realized then Michael's reach extended deeper than I'd feared. He wasn't just stealing property. He was rewriting my history in the town I'd helped build. At the next hearing, the courtroom gallery looked different. Faces I once knew from church, from the job sites, avoided my eyes. Michael's lawyer paraded affidavits from former employees, each one alleging unfair treatment. One affidavit came from a man I'd hired as an apprentice back in the 1990s. He'd eaten at my table more times than I could count. Now his words declared me dishonest, careless, cruel. I gripped the defense table until my knuckles whitened. Betrayal is sharper when it comes from familiar hands. MS. Hernandez countered each affidavit with payroll records and safety audits. Derek provided digital archives, invoices signed by those very employees proving they'd been paid in full. Still, damage spread faster than proof. Halfway through the day during a recess, I stepped outside the courthouse. A small crowd had gathered, not supporters this time but protesters. Hand-painted signs read, "Respect workers. No justice for abusers." They didn't chant. They only stared as I walked past, and their silence cut deeper than any shouted word. That evening I sat alone in the motel, the walls pressing closer. I thought of Elaine's chair back in the house, sitting empty. I thought of the years I'd spent paying tuition, signing checks, pouring concrete with my own hands. And I thought of Michael, weaving lies like spider silk, patient and suffocating. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept in. Maybe the truth wasn't enough. Maybe lies, repeated often enough, could smother a man's legacy entirely. It was Derek who saved me from that spiral. He barged in with Clara, both flushed with urgency. Derek dropped a USB drive onto the table. "George, we found something. Michael's smear campaign isn't organic, it's coordinated. He's been paying for fake testimonies, even hiring bots to amplify hashtags." Clara opened her laptop, showing a cascade of identical comments flooding social media. "Look, same phrasing, same accounts posting on multiple platforms. It's manufactured outrage." I blinked, disbelief giving way to grim clarity. So he's trying to drown me in noise, not truth. Derek grinned, the first real spark of hope all week. And now we can prove it. Later that night, as rain hammered the motel roof, I stared at my yellow pad. He stole my house, then tried to steal my mind. Now he's trying to steal my name. But lies can't breathe long in daylight. For the first time in days, I felt something stirring again. Not just anger, but resolve sharpened into strategy. The motel room had become our war room. Papers littered the desk, cables snaked across the carpet. Derek's laptop cast blue light on our weary faces. Clara typed furiously, tracing data streams like a detective hunting footprints in the sand. "This isn't grassroots anger," she said at last, spinning the screen toward me. "See this cluster, 50 accounts created within the same week, all posting the same hashtags, the same phrases, automated." Derek added, "We traced payments, guess who's funding it? A shell company tied to Michael's business partner." MS. Hernandez folded her arms. "So he's not just lying in court. He's manufacturing outrage to poison the jury pool." My jaw tightened. I thought betrayal had already scraped the bottom of the barrel. Apparently, there was always a deeper layer. The next day, MS. Hernandez filed a motion to introduce the discovery. The judge permitted a preliminary hearing. Inside the courtroom, Derek projected the data trail across a screen. Fake accounts, synchronized posts, identical timestamps. Clara explained how the PR firm specialized in reputation demolition. Then came the twist. Derek clicked open a contract, an actual invoice from the firm listing Michael Turner Jr. as client. The gallery gasped. Even the judge's expression shifted from weary neutrality to something sharper. "Mr. Turner Jr.," the judge said slowly, "are you aware your name appears on this invoice?" Michael's lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, it could be fabricated." But MS. Hernandez cut him off. "The payment originated from Michael's business account. Bank statements confirm it. This isn't rumor, it's paper trail." By noon, the story broke beyond the courtroom. Reporters swarmed the steps, microphones shoved toward me. "Mr. Turner, what do you say to your son's smear campaign being exposed?" I steadied my voice. Truth doesn't need armies of fake voices. Only lies do. I raised my son to work with his own hands, but somewhere along the way he learned to pay others to do his dirty work. I won't match his noise. I'll keep showing proof. That evening, news headlines screamed, "Smear campaign linked to Turner Jr." Father's reputation war exposed as manufactured. For the first time, strangers on the street met my eyes with nods instead of suspicion. But victory in public brought fury in private. When Michael left the courthouse that afternoon, he broke his practiced composure. Cameras caught him jabbing a finger at reporters, shouting, "This isn't over. My father is a liar and you'll all see it." The clip aired across every station. His voice, once smooth and rehearsed, now cracked with desperation. Ms. Hernandez leaned over to me as we watched from the motel. He slipped, publicly. That anger will cost him credibility in court. Yet I felt no triumph, only a heavy sadness. I'd watched my son unravel on live television, and the world saw not a fighter for justice but a man cornered by his own deceit. That night, Derek brought coffee and Clara laid out the next steps. "We've turned the tide," she said softly. "But he's not finished. Cornered men lash out, expect something bigger." I stared at my yellow pad, the words flowing almost by themselves. He tried to steal my house. He tried to steal my mind. He tried to steal my name. Now he's losing his mask. I set down the pen. "Let him come," I whispered. "The truth is louder than his noise." The courthouse was packed to the rafters that morning. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens already scratching before the gavel struck. Neighbors I'd known for decades sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting not for legal arguments but for something rower, the collapse or survival of a family. I adjusted my tie, palms damp. "Ms. Hernandez whispered, "Stay steady, George. Today we bring it all." Across the aisle, Michael sat rigid, jaw clenched. He avoided my eyes. For a moment I saw not a man but the boy who once begged me to teach him how to drive. Then the bailiff called order and the memory dissolved. The opening statements were swift. Michael's lawyer repeated tired lines about inheritance, intention, obligation. Ms. Hernandez countered with a single sentence. "This is not about property. It's about exploitation dressed up as entitlement." Then came the evidence. Derek and Clara projected the financial trail across the screen: loans, invoices, payments to the smear campaign. The jury of onlookers gasped at each revelation. Michael shifted in his seat, sweat beading at his temple. At the halfway point, Ms. Hernandez asked the clerk to admit a new exhibit, a notarized bank file. She handed it to the judge. "Your Honor, this document shows the petitioner attempted to secure a private loan using his father's property as collateral, property he did not own." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Turner Jr., is this your signature?" Michael's face drained of color. That's not." But his voice broke and the courtroom knew. I stood then, requested permission to speak. The judge allowed it. My voice carried heavier than I intended, years of anger and grief packed into each word. I worked 30 years for that house. Every brick, every paycheck, every sacrifice was mine and Elaine's. And my son, my only son, has spent years not asking but taking, forging papers, hiring liars, even paying strangers to tear my name apart. I am not senile, I am not cruel. I am a father who said yes too often, and today I am saying no. The gallery erupted in murmurs. The gavel hammered, but the sound could not drown the truth already loose in the air. Michael finally broke. He shot to his feet, eyes blazing. "You think you're a hero. You're a tyrant. You controlled everything, and when I tried to take what should be mine, you called it theft. You'll die in that house alone, and you deserve it." His words sliced through the room, but instead of sympathy, they drew silence. A silence heavier than condemnation. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Turner Jr., sit down. This court has heard enough." The ruling came swift as thunder. The claims of inheritance are rejected. The respondent retains full ownership and authority over the property. Furthermore, this court refers the matter of fabricated evidence and smear campaigns for criminal review. The gavel struck. With it, months of tension released in a single echo. I should have felt victory. Instead, I looked at Michael, my son, slumped, lips moving as though cursing under his breath. Reporters surged, flashes exploding, but all I saw was the boy Elaine once rocked to sleep. I walked out of the courtroom to cheers from strangers, but inside my chest was hollow. Winning the house had cost me my son. That evening, back in the motel, Derek and Clara celebrated, clinking paper coffee cups. Ms. Hernandez smiled faintly, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. I sat apart, staring at the yellow pad. I wrote slowly, hand unsteady. Victory in court, defeat at home. The words blurred in the lamplight, not from age but from the sting in my eyes. When the courthouse doors closed behind me, the crowd's cheers felt strangely distant. Strangers congratulated me, shook my hand, slapped my back. But by the time I drove up the familiar mountain road and parked in front of my house, silence had returned. The villa stood still under the afternoon sun, its windows reflecting the lake. For months I'd fought to prove it was mine. Now that it was, the victory felt like a hollow crown. I opened the door with trembling hands. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Elaine's rocking chair waited in the corner. My tools hung in the shed. The yellow legal pad sat on the table, pages filled with my own handwriting, a record of every battle. And yet the house echoed with absence. For days I tried to settle into routine. Coffee at dawn, a walk along the water, repairs around the porch. But everywhere I turned, ghosts trailed me. Elaine's laugh in the kitchen, Michael's small hands tugging at my sleeve decades ago. I had the house, but not the family it was meant to hold. One morning, a letter arrived in the mailbox. The handwriting was unfamiliar but steady. Mr. Turner, I don't know if you remember me. I was in your crew 20 years ago. You gave me work when no one else would. I saw what your son said about you in the papers. Don't believe it. Not all of us turned against you. Some of us remember the truth. I sat on the porch for an hour, the letter trembling in my hands. It wasn't much, but it was enough to crack the shell of loneliness. That afternoon, Derek stopped by with Clara. They were smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in weeks. "You've got your house back, George," Derek said. "But more than that, people are seeing you again. The smear collapsed. The papers are running corrections." I nodded, but my voice stayed quiet. "I didn't win back my son." Clara's smile faded. "Some things don't return, but maybe something else can grow in their place." That night I sat in Elaine's chair, staring at the lake lit silver by the moon. I whispered into the quiet, "What do I do now?" And for the first time the answer came not as her voice in memory but as my own, "Build again." The next morning I called Ms. Hernandez. "I want to place the villa into a trust," I said. "Not for Michael, for the community. Veterans, workers, families who need respite. This house shouldn't be a battlefield, it should be a refuge." There was silence on the line, then her voice softened. "George, that might be the most powerful choice you've made yet." The legal work took weeks, but something shifted in me as it unfolded. The house that once felt like a fortress now opened like a doorway. Volunteers came to help prepare. Neighbors, some who doubted me, showed up with paintbrushes and lumber. Slowly, the villa filled not with accusation but with laughter again. I knew Michael might never cross that threshold. That wound ran too deep. But for the first time in years, I didn't live inside grief. On the last page of my yellow pad I wrote, "Victory isn't keeping what you built. It's choosing what you do with it after the fight." I set the pen down, stood, and looked out at the lake. The water was calm, the mountains steady. And for the first time in a long while, I felt steady too. The villa no longer felt like a fortress or a courtroom exhibit. By midsummer, it had become what I always wished it to be, a place of welcome. Children played in the yard where Elaine once planted roses. Veterans from town spent quiet afternoons by the lake, their laughter echoing against the mountains. Every sound reminded me that I had chosen not just to keep the house, but to give it life again. One evening, after the last guests left and silence returned, I brewed a cup of coffee and stepped onto the porch. The sky burned orange, fading into purple. For the first time in years, I felt peace deep enough to unclench the knots in my chest. That's when I heard footsteps on the gravel drive. I turned, half expecting Derek or Clara, but it wasn't them. Michael stood at the edge of the porch light. No lawyer, no documents, just him, hands in his pockets, eyes shadowed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air seemed to hold its breath. He finally said, voice hoarse, "I drove by, saw people here, didn't think you'd really do it. I kept my tone calm. "I told you this house wouldn't be yours, but I also said it wasn't just mine." He shifted, uneasy. They look happy here." I searched his face, looking for the boy Elaine and I had raised. For the first time in months I saw something softer than anger, hesitation, maybe even regret. "I can't undo what's been done, Michael," I said quietly. "You tried to take everything, and maybe I let you take too much before, but this place, this legacy doesn't belong to lies." He looked at me then, really looked, as if weighing words unsaid. His lips parted, but whatever apology or excuse lived there died before it reached me. Instead, he nodded once. "I just wanted to see it one last time." And he turned, walking back toward the dark road. I didn't call after him. Some wounds don't close in a night, but as his figure disappeared into the dusk, I felt something loosen in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faintest outline of possibility. I sat back on the porch, coffee cooling in my hands, and whispered toward the lake. "Elaine, maybe we're not finished after all." The mountain stood quiet, the water still, holding the moment like a secret. And that's where I'll leave this story. It isn't only about property or courts. It's about fathers and children, about the thin line between love and exploitation, and about learning to stand tall again. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read and value every one of them. Thank you truly for spending your time with me.